Hey folks, welcome back to the Husker Big Red YouTube channel. I'm Chris Peterson of HuskerBigRed.com, and with me as always is my co-host Danny Gillette of thegreatcornholio.org. Hopefully you guys had a good Christmas. We're here a couple of days after, and we're going to break down the recent news with Garrett Nelson and talk some recruiting and some other big additions for the Huskers. But yeah, we'll start. Danny, how was the old Christmas?
It was good. It went by too quick. The older you get, the more it doesn't feel like Christmas. But I mean, that's why I appreciate the ones I had as kids so much more now. Because once you get old, everything changes. And I think I had a good Christmas though. I can't have any complaints. It just didn't feel like it this year. So I'm happy to be back here talking with you. And even on the holiday break, and even during a time of the holidays, there is still a lot of news.
Yeah, there's always that's never a dull moment, with Nebraska athletics. And Garrett Nelson on Tuesday came up and announced his decision to forego his last year of eligibility for the NFL draft. So that's obviously a big loss for the Huskers, and we'll get into that. But yeah, some other news that's happened since we've been recorded last. Ben Scott, the offensive lineman from Arizona State, finally committed, and that was a big get for the Huskers, and we'll talk about that too. But starting with Garrett Nelson, I mean, the captain, the guy that was carrying the trophy around Kinnick Stadium after the win. I thought he was going to come back this year, and what are your thoughts on him putting his name in for the NFL draft?
I thought he could have used one more year. I certainly wish him the best. I'm not wishing him, badly in any sense, but I thought he could have used one more year in Lincoln. Um, I think with the type of skill that he showed last year as an edge rusher, 5.5 sacks, that was the first year, in my opinion, that I really saw him kind of, form a role as an edge rusher. And edge rushers are very, very important in the NFL these days. They're almost like their own positional group. And so I just think you maybe could have used one more year to just kind of refine that skill. Not that he was bad at it, but just some more tape for the scouts to see. And, you know, I. I'm not sure if he'll get drafted, but I do think he'll find his way on an NFL team.
Yeah, it's always a tough situation when you have a new head coach coming in, and I don't know. I wonder if that played a role in it. I don't know. Yeah, I feel like he's got a chance on day 3 to get drafted at some point. But it'll be tough. But he's a solid pass rusher. He was pretty productive this past season. I think he does a good job, setting the edge. But a lot of it's I think going to depend on how he tests out and those types of things. We know how that works. But yeah, it wouldn't shock me to hear his name called. Hopefully he does. I would have obviously liked to see him, with a year under Tony White to see what he could do there and see if he could improve his draft stock. But maybe he didn't. Feel like the system was a good fit for him, or maybe he didn't even get to that point, and he just wanted to, kind of get a fresh start with his football career. But would have been nice to see him come back and hopefully get to a bowl game next year. I believe that there's a good chance that'll happen. But yeah, I wish him the best, and I hope everything goes well for him. But that's now 2 of basically Nebraska's top sack guys from a year ago. Him and O'Shawn Mathis are out the door. Caleb Tanner was out of eligibility, so really Nebraska is going to need some new pass rushers to kind of step up. So how much does this loss kind of hurt the Huskers, do you think?
It hurts, I think. It definitely hurts because it takes away a guy with experience. And when you compound Nelson's loss with Mathis's loss, you're taking away a lot of proven production. There are some guys coming down the road. Princewell Umamalin is one of them, but he's still an unknown. I think he'll be very good, but we don't know how he fits. And truth be told, we wouldn't know how Nelson or even Mathis would fit in this new defense. But even still, Nelson would provide stability and a sense of familiarity on that Nebraska defense that is undergoing a lot of changes, more so than just scheme. And truth be told, I mean, I laughed when Cam Jurgens said he was going into the NFL draft, and then he had an absolutely tremendous combine. So you never know. I mean, people can say what they want about the combine, and I've had my questions about it as well, but there's no doubt that the combine definitely helps somebody like Cam Jurgens, for example, and maybe, this will give Nelson the opportunity to really show what he's got.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, he has sack production and he can hold up well against the run. I mean, to me, he seems like somebody, rounds 5 through 7, he could go in that range. And that would be good to see, him get picked. I always love to see Nebraska guys get picked. And Mathis is probably the same. I think it's going to be, how they test and, finding the right fit. But, like you said, even as long as you get signed as I definitely see both of them getting into NFL training camps next year, on a rookie free agent deal. And the worst case scenario. And I would think with their production and background in college, they would get some signing bonus money at the very least. So, I can totally understand it, and I would think both have a good chance to make an NFL roster next year. To be honest with you, but looking at Nebraska, yeah, it's definitely going to leave some holes there. I mean, probably basically their top three pass rushers are out the door. They do have you mentioned him, Prince Wells coming in, and he's a big guy, 6'4", 215 pounds. I mean, and Terrence Knighton talked about how he sees him as being ready, to make an immediate impact. But it's hard to count on a freshman to be, that big of an impact. Your top edge rusher. Kai Wallen is one of the. I think he's like the fifth ranked edge rusher out of the JUCO ranks, and he's 6'6", kind of built a little bit like Nelson. Nelson's like 6'5", so he'll. I think he will. I think both of those guys are going to contribute next year. You've got Jamari Butler, you've got Blaine Gunnerson, so you've got some other guys there. But I mean, do you think that this should be, still a position that Nebraska is looking to, in the transfer portal? And I think, like with Elijah Judy, he's not really an edge. I mean, the guy from Texas A&M, he's more of an interior, defense, DN, D tackle type. So Nebraska really doesn't have, that pickup. So do you think are you hoping that they target that position here in the transfer portal?
It's a good question because part of me wants to see how guys like Prince Well and Kai Wallen play out. The other part of me, if it fails, I don't want to be scrambling for an edge rusher. I don't think they necessarily need it because I truly do think there is raw talent at the edge position, but I do think it's one that, we've talked about keeping the cupboard stocked, next man up. If the first guy can't go, we got to have a second guy ready who can play right now. I do think it's a position that they should focus on keeping the cupboard stocked, and always making sure that they have somebody at the edge rusher position.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see, and it's a spot there, in the portal where a lot of, the top players don't last a long time. So, we'll have to see kind of what's there. But one, upside thing I think about, Prince William and he's enrolling early. I believe Maverick Noonan's enrolling early too. So those are two guys that obviously you're hoping, can contribute as edge rushers next season, and they'll at least get that, opportunity to go through the program, go through spring practice and, have as much time in this new defense as possible as they try to make that adjustment to, college football, which is always, a step up, obviously, no matter how, high level your high school play is. But yeah, it'll be interesting. I mean, they definitely have guys, and maybe that's a reason that Jamari Butler decided to come back. I thought that when first he went to the portal and then he went out of the portal, and I wondered if that had anything to do with Garrett Nelson and what his decision would be, or maybe O'Shawn Mathis, because those guys want to roll too, and I think that they've shown some things. Gunners definitely has shown some stuff on the edge, and he's a big long guy. So we'll have to see how they do it. And, it's up to the coaches to kind of deploy the guys. It seems like almost Nebraska's going to have a solid, maybe interior pass rush with, Ty Robinson and, Elijah Judy, and hopefully, Riley Van Poppel can contribute, in that area too next season. But I still think that they need to add some more depth, in the transfer portal in the defensive front seven.
Yeah, and I think when you look at the 3-3-5, and I know there's different combinations you can run, but you're going to have a lot of defensive backs on the field. And I think, like you said, a lot of the pass rushing is coming from the interior. I think having those big guys, while they're not on the edge, could also be helpful to stop the run. So I think there's kind of a plan there, maybe on the defensive line to focus more on inside runs than just straight up pass rushing, which I wouldn't mind considering, the running back talent in the Big Ten, but it'll be interesting to see how the scheme plays out and, what techniques are used and how much these, younger guys and new guys come in and, you know, step up. And I think it's going to start during spring ball. And it's one of the position battles, the edge position and just the pass rushing, position that I'm going to be watching for sure.
Yeah, and now it's been now that we've got early signing day out of this, out of the equation. There's still, a few recruits left on the board, and one is, a guy in Cameron Leonard who could, if he ended up committing and coming to Nebraska, he's a guy that could help contribute with the pass rush too. He's, potentially, a guy who could be an edge. He's listed as a D end, but he's like 6'3", 240, so he's kind of a guy in that same mix. And I think things have been seemingly pretty positive. It's down to Nebraska and Maryland for him. He's announcing at the All American Bowl, which is I believe January 7th. I might be wrong on that, but I believe that's when it is. And he would certainly help. Ethan Nation is the top 500 cornerback that's also announcing at the All American Bowl, and there's kind of some indications with some expert picks that Nebraska could be the choice there. So what are your thoughts on those two guys and what they would bring to the 2023 class?
Well, if you take a guy like Leonard and his pass rushing ability, it doesn't matter whether he's inside, edge, he can just straight pass rush. So that would immediately, give Nebraska an impact player. And I believe Ethan Nation, wasn't he a last minute addition to one of the first big visit weekends? I think the staff was working on him in the middle of December, and then they managed to get him down for a visit. So, I mean, there's definitely a plan with these recruits and who they're bringing in. And I think Leonard and Nation would definitely be great additions to the defense. If you add Leonard to the equation, I think some of the pass rushing concerns can go out the window. I mean, he's just that good and that strong and that quick. So, if Nebraska lands those two, they're in good shape, and it's always fun to land a recruit that's playing in the All-American Bowl, and maybe two, but I'm not getting greedy here. I'll take one at the very least.
Yeah, I feel like with Ethan Nation especially, he's listed at 5'10", 165. So I don't know if that's been part of the reason, teams have shown maybe a little less interest, but he's 463 in the composite rankings overall. And he's out of Georgia. And Nebraska is the only school that's really listed as warm right now. He visited there the 16th of December and hasn't taken a visit anywhere else basically since April. I mean, just according to the 24/7 Sports, which could be not necessarily accurate. But the thing I like about this kid and what he can do is over the course of his high school career, he's got 20 pass breakups and 12 interceptions. So I mean, that's a guy who's getting his hands on the football, making plays on the ball, and so he's one it would be really great if he was added to the class. And like I said, they're both ranked in the top 500. So if they do wind up committing, that's going to trend Nebraska's class up even further. That would get them to 23 signees. And honestly, with the way that these guys kind of do it is they probably already signed, and Nebraska probably already knows whether they've got them or not, and they're just going to make their announcement that day, because otherwise they would have to wait to sign until February. And I highly doubt that. So unless these guys really didn't know, I'm betting that the Nebraska coaching staff probably already knows whether these guys have signed, and they're just gonna announce it that day.
I would bet a
Kind of.
good amount. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, kind of like Polanola Gates or whatever, a few years ago, he was a similar situation.
I actually remember staying up talking with you, writing about it for one of our previous jobs, and we were so excited about him. It just brought a little memory. But yeah, so far he hasn't materialized. But anyway, um, I mean, I would be willing to bet a fair sum of money that right now they're just looking for an edit guy. You know what I mean? Somebody that can, put their graphic, make the announcement, make everything look all, cool and whatever. And I bet you the staff knows. I mean, especially with how the staff recruits and how on top of things they seem to be. I bet you they're, let's just say, factoring Leonard and Nation into their plans, especially when it comes to scholarship amounts and things like that.
So, assuming that they get those two guys, do you think there's anything else left in on the board for 2023?
No, I mean, I think honestly, this is a damn good class. They did a good job of trying to address several positions, and they did a good job of getting it done in some, 3 or 4 weeks. You know, I said it at the time, to go from the mid 60s ranking wise to just outside the top 25 in a matter of weeks is incredible. And, I think especially for a new coaching staff coming in just before early signing day, they did a good job of retaining, most of the players in the state of Nebraska, including Malachi Coleman. So I think this class is very good. It's been a long time since I've been able to say that, and not just good in terms of talent, but balanced and, have players that can come in and play right away. And I think that also speaks to the development part for this program and the staff's eye in identifying talent. Of course, we got to see the product on the field, but I'm very happy with this class. I don't really think there are any other major needs for now, and they can start working on the 2024 class with a full year under their belt by the time everything is said and done.
Yeah, definitely. And talking about, some guys, some other additions too, putting some focus on the transfer portal. And yeah, one guy like we mentioned at the start of the show that committed in the past week is Ben Scott. It leaked out on Facebook. His mom, posted that he was going to be a Husker, and this was a big win for Nebraska. He's, basically a 2 year starter at Arizona State, and everybody there started to be some, projections to Auburn, and UCLA was strongly in the mix, and it didn't seem like Nebraska was going to get him. And then lo and behold, Nebraska got him. So he's a guy that, he started at tackle for Arizona State. He started 11 games at center for them last year, so he's played a lot of football, I think over like 1,700 snaps or something in his career. So that's a huge get in the transfer portal. It's kind of the thing Nebraska was never able to get, last year. So yeah, what were your thoughts on Ben Scott? What does his addition mean for the Huskers?
Had a little technical difficulty there, but no, I think I was honestly surprised we got him. And I saw the Facebook post that his mom posted that was circulating on the internet. I bet you she didn't know that she was going to go viral with her Facebook post, but that's just the way we are as Husker fans. But no, I really like his addition. I think Nebraska did a good job of identifying, needs on the offensive line, and you know, um, Ben Scott brings experience, whereas some of the other names um, on the line that we recruited are a little bit rawer. Ben Scott brings experience and a pretty good resume. So I think he's a guy that can play multiple positions, and he's a guy that I watched some of his tape and he blocks very well. He's a strong guy. It's not just hyperbole. He really is a very strong lineman. So I am very excited about his addition, and I would just like maybe one more offensive lineman. But I mean, if it comes down to another offensive lineman and or Kim Lenhart or Ethan Nation or however it goes, I would rather honestly those two. I mean, those damn scholarship limits get in the way. I want everybody, but I'm very happy with Scott.
Yeah, I think it's a really big pickup, and center's a big position. And having a guy that is experienced, I believe he has 2 years of eligibility left. So I feel like that's going to be huge for Nebraska, and just having that position sorted out, getting him in here, for spring practice, he can get familiar with the quarterbacks, and just an experienced quality starter. And he is a guy that's played more than one position too, which I think is always valuable for offensive linemen. I would like to see him add, somebody else at least that could play right tackle. That maybe you could be, a tackle guard type situation. I feel uneasy with Bryce Bennett going into this next season as the starter at right tackle, and that's kind of how it's looking right now. But look, this new coaching staff, it's up to them to get the best out of the guy. He was a former 4-star recruit, so they got to figure out if they have anything there. But I would like to see some competition, or at least somebody who could has some starting tackle experience in the at the college level, which isn't easy to find in the transfer portal. And I'm sure too that talking about scholarship limits, I'm sure after spring ball they're going to see some more guys kind of triculate out of the program. And, Nelson obviously was another one, and we'll see how that, I think they, probably still need, 8-10 guys to, kind of work their way out. So that'll be something to, monitor going forward, and how all that, shakes out with the new coaching staff. But getting Ben Scott was a big win. And, they got some nice pieces, I think, in the transfer portal that can help immediately next year. Josh Fleeks is one. I think he's going to help at wide receiver right away, in that kind of slot position. And, I
So
mean,
fast. He's so
yeah.
fast.
And you talk, you think about that, the speed, I mean, not to, I mean, there's Oliver Martin and Brody Belton, those guys, and Fleeks is going to add that speed, and he has been in this system before, so he's going to also bring that to the table. And obviously, I think Malachi Coleman and some of these freshman wide receivers are going to have a chance to play right away. I still think they need to find a tight end too, for sure. With you know, I do think that Thomas Fidone can play, but Brewington obviously is gone too, and Vokalek, and the thing about Brewington, I mean, he was maybe their best blocking tight end, so that's another thing that you lose in kind of the running game. And if you want to be a physical running team, it wouldn't be a bad thing to add another tight end. And for what with Thomas Fidone, that wasn't really his deal. I mean, I'm not saying he can't block, but he wasn't really known as a blocker. He's known more as a pass catcher, and I would love to see him catching some passes next year. I think that's going to be a huge presence, but there's definitely still some needs of some area of need, I think, in the transfer portal going forward.
And you mentioned it's hard to find offensive linemen in the portal. Same thing with tight ends. It's because everybody wants them. I mean, they're a hot commodity. And so, you know, I would rather us take, not guaranteed additions, but guys like Lenhart and Nation over missing somebody on the offensive line in the transfer portal, if you know what I mean, because we've done that before, and and it's not been pretty. But yeah, no, I'm really interested about the tight end room. It's not that I don't think the tight end room has talent, because I do think that they do. I think that room as a whole, we have a lot of tight ends on the roster, and I do think that position has talent. To me, it's just the injury history and development, not issues, but the lack of even playing time at the position. It makes me wonder where we stand. And, Chancellor Brewington was a very good blocking tight end. He only had 1 year of eligibility when he announced his intentions to go to the draft on Monday. So, from that respect, I can understand it. I don't know if he's going to be drafted, but I think his blocking, will get him on a special teams role of some sort. But yeah, the tight end room really concerns me, I think, moving forward, and hopefully everything pans out and these recruits lived up live up to their, star ranking, and these players live up to their star ranking as recruits. And stop me if you've heard that one before.
Yeah, and I think part of it too. I mean, I think Nebraska's going to evaluate some of its needs after the spring, and I think there's another transfer portal, kind of window there, I believe. And I'm sure it's not just limited to, this, few weeks in January or whatever. So I mean, they can address some needs there too, and I'm sure they'll be looking at Fedoni and some of these other guys, and trying to figure out how everybody kind of fits together. But yeah, I'm sure we'll see some more departures, by between now and then. I'm sure we'll see some more additions. Yeah, I would think, three, tight end, edge rusher, and offensive line would be the three things I would look for this team, in the transfer portal. I feel like they're pretty solid everywhere else, as long as there's no, big name additions or, departures. There's a lot of interesting pieces kind of still, on the roster. Is Ramir Johnson going to stick around? Maybe he feels like this system, they actually run the ball will be a little bit better for him. And look, if he could be the guy that he was, 2 years ago, then your running back room is looking quite a bit, looking pretty good with Anthony Grant and AJ Allen. And I feel like if Malachi Coleman can be a contributor right away, the receiving core, is looking pretty solid. And especially with Fleek, added in there, I think that's going to add, a dimension in the slot, for sure. And look, he's a kid that, he's had some solid seasons before. It's kind of dropped off the last couple of years. I don't know if he's been hurt. Probably has a little bit. I haven't checked that much on it, but he definitely is going to be able to make an impact in the system, and he's going to be able to help, I think, with that transition. Hopefully Alante Brown can step up. Hopefully Thomas Fidone can step up. But if Matt Rule and his coaching staff can get all these guys to kind of play up to their recruiting ranking, then Nebraska I think is going to have a shot to be pretty decent next year, even just with the roster as is right now.
And honestly, with Ramir Johnson, I don't think it's a question of him being able to get back to what he was 2 years ago. I think it's going to be helpful to have a coach that is hopefully not stubborn and plays favorites, because I do think, you know, Mark Whipple didn't like Johnson for whatever reason, which is kind of strange to think about because he hyped up Johnson in the summer. But, I don't think it's a question. And initially, I thought maybe Johnson wasn't good enough, but now, knowing everything we know about Mark Whipple and his favoritism, I'm wondering if that played a role in it as well, because people can get on Johnson for the dropped catch against Illinois, but it's hard to, you know, make these plays when you don't have many reps to begin with, and you just come in one game and are expected to make an impact. So I am curious to see where he falls on this roster, and I think this offense may fit him a little bit better, and um, having a cohesive coaching staff that is all on the same page, I think, will help him as well. And so I am curious to see what he brings to the table. Same thing for, Fedoni. I remember being so excited about him coming in, and it's just been the injury issues that, have plagued this Nebraska program. And, I think hopefully the new strength and conditioning coach will, be able to help with that a little bit, because I do think that plays a part in it. And you know, some of these players that we were wondering about last year, I could see taking steps, next season, not major steps, but just a fresh start for everybody. And I think that
Mhm.
was needed all across the board.
Yeah, and I mean, one thing is, I know that the Big Ten's obviously changing with USC and UCLA, but it's not changing next year. And right now, I feel like the Big Ten West is wide open
Uh-huh.
as it's ever been. I mean,
Mhm.
Minnesota and Purdue are graduating quarterbacks. I think Illinois is losing their quarterback too, Tommy DeVito. I could be wrong on that. He might have another year, but they're definitely losing, their big time running back, and Minnesota's losing their running back. Purdue has a new head coach. Illinois is losing their defensive coordinator, Ryan Walters, who's going to Purdue. I mean, so there's a lot of things up in the mix. I'm not in Iowa, you
Purdue
know,
did get Hudson Card though.
yeah,
So
I mean,
we'll
yeah,
see.
that was a good get. I mean, and Oklahoma or Wisconsin, excuse me, got the Nick Evers, a former 4-star from Oklahoma, but he's only a freshman. He hasn't, he's going into his sophomore year and didn't play at all. So I mean, we'll see. Chase Wolf looked pretty good last night as Wisconsin beat Oklahoma State. But, yeah, I mean, I think that it's really wide open if Nebraska can, just get all these pieces to, play a little bit better and, kind of mesh with, the Matt Rule system. And I feel like they have a chance to, be competitive. Iowa got, Cade McNamara and Eric all from Michigan. And I do think that's going to help their pass offense. But I don't know that they're going to be overhauled, in a night. We'll see. I mean, we'll see what happens. But Nebraska also has Casey Thompson and Jeff Sims, and whichever one of those quarterbacks that winds up winning the job, I feel like they have as good of a quarterback situation as anybody else. And I feel like if you look at kind of some of the skill position guys, I feel like they're pretty solid. So I don't know. I just feel like if you look back at this year, if that things had just gone a little bit differently, they weren't that far off. So I feel like it wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility for Nebraska to be right in the mix in the Big Ten West race next year.
And if you look, the one thing I am worried about is Minnesota. Looking at the first game of the season, Minnesota's quarterback, whose name I can't remember, who came in and torched us last season, he was pretty good. So I am worried about Minnesota a little bit, but that running game element that they have always had will hopefully be subdued a little bit, because they've lost some good running backs over the years. And I do think this is wide open. I do think Nebraska will have a chance to really make some noise with a much more favorable schedule than last year, in my opinion. So we'll see. I mean, I am very happy with this class. I am very happy with the addition of Ben Scott and the focus on the line. And it all starts in spring ball. So, sometimes I'll say, oh, this program's, just getting tuned up for fall camp. But I think with a new coaching staff and as many new faces and a new defense, um, I think this spring ball will mean a lot. And I think also, you know, you mentioned, UCLA and USC coming in. I really like, and I know I've said this before, but I'll say it again. I really like the fact that we switched to a 3-3-5. I do think that was the right move for Nebraska to get a coach who runs that, because I do think it's not going to be gone, but the Big Ten's going to become more of a passing league.
Yeah, it definitely isn't. I mean, thinking about next year, just the schedule doesn't look as hard, but it is you're playing your first two games on the road. I mean, those are the first two, so Matt Rule really, I mean, they got to win one of those two games. Like they really he can't be coming into Lincoln for the home opener 0-2. That's not going to be, so they've got to find a way to win, one of those two games against Minnesota and Colorado. That's that's going to be important, I think, just for trying to get to a bowl game and establishing some early season momentum for this program. But we'll see how it all works out. But yeah, this spring ball is going to be important. I mean, the quarterback position is going to be really important. I think not just Jeff Sims, but seeing if some of these other guys, can develop, or if some of them transfer out, after this spring. So yeah, I'm interested to see how it all goes, and we'll see how this 2023 recruiting class winds up in the transfer portal. But I think it really, the focus has really started to shift to the 2024 class, and I think that's what you're going to see mostly with this coaching staff. There's been Ian Flint got a crystal ball projection to Nebraska. Aaron Hampton, I believe is his name. Top 100 receiver, and he was kind of interacting with Dylan Raiola, saying, hey, whenever you're ready to
Yep.
basically to commit, I'm ready. So we'll see. I mean, I've been saying this. I don't think that Dylan Raiola is like going to commit in the next few weeks. So I mean, I know people
No.
got excited about that hashtag, and they were thinking like some big announcement was coming in 24 hours. I think it means the class of 2024 is going to be ours. I don't know. I mean, I'm not trying to figure out the social media stuff, but I don't think Dylan Raiola. I would expect him to take some visits before he makes a decision. I'll just say that. And he's coming up on. He can take some official visits in the spring, in the summer. So I would expect that type of timeline sometime. I don't think we're going to see anything during these winter months. That would be my prediction for his recruitment.
Matt Rule is making me feel old in the social media game with all these hashtags and emojis and things like that. But no, I think you hit it on the head. I think it's the 24 class is ours, not a 24-hour announcement. But it got people talking, didn't it? It got people talking, and you mentioned you know recruits tweeting at Dylan Raiola, and some of the best recruiters are your own guys, are your own recruits, are peers and kids, because they'll tell like it is. They won't sugarcoat it. And I'm sure these kids have been fed a lot of BS on recruiting from multiple coaches all across the country. So to have peer recruiting be as strong as it is a very good sign, I think, because if kids want to play with a certain kid, they'll come here. If kids know that they have playing time, they'll come here. So I mean, it's a whole different world in terms of recruiting and the transfer portal and National Signing Day than it was even 5 years ago. And I think honestly, this staff is very well prepared to handle all of the change.
Yeah, and I think with thinking about Dylan Raiola, I'm interested with his recruitment because there's also Daniel Kalen, he's one of the top players in the state of Nebraska for the 2024 class. I think he's number 4. He's a quarterback too, and Matt Rule, kind of when he took over, was like, we don't want you to leave the state, but I can't, I don't see him wanting to be part of a class that's also with Dylan Raiola. So I mean, I just think it's going to be, well, you have to pay attention to Dylan Raiola and try to get him. He's the number 1 player in the class. I feel like you still have to, be recruiting Daniel Kalen either. You don't want to overlook him, because if you miss Raiola, then he's got to be the other guy that you're really going after. I think that's if I had obviously I'm not Matt Rule, but based off of what he told Kalen, and his wanting to recruit the state of Nebraska and all that type of stuff. I mean, my quarterback board would be Raiola and then Daniel Kalen right now. So hopefully that's what they're thinking. He was talking about making an early decision after the New Year's. I don't think that that's going to be the case. It seems like he'll probably wind up taking some visits too. But he's another one. I don't want to miss on Raiola and then miss on him too, because he got ignored because they were all So I don't want to put all of our eggs in one basket, I guess is what I'm saying. I've seen that's happened before, and it doesn't always work out.
Max Duggan is a name that Nebraska's mixed on before. And but anyway, no. I think it's a good idea. I think it's a good plan, and that was just kind of what I was going to say as well. I think you have to be prepared as if Dylan Raiola is not coming and recruit him hard, and also be prepared if Daniel Kalen is not coming and recruiting hard. No sitting back and cracking open a cold one thinking you've landed either. I mean, because we've seen what happens when you can't recruit the quarterback room, it becomes an absolute mess, and we don't want to do that again. And so, I think honestly, and this is probably going to be like a no duh statement to a lot of you, but it's just worth repeating. This coaching staff and these players will know each other's decisions long before we do. So I think the recruiting focus and what we see publicly will be a strong indication as to what the team is thinking and what the player is thinking. If we see an uptick in the Daniel Kalen recruitment, then maybe Dylan Raiola is not coming here. If things are sort of radio silent on Kalen, then maybe Dylan Raiola is coming here. I mean, it'll be interesting to see how they recruit the position. I don't think it's going to be like the last staff where there was just incompetence all over the place in recruiting the position. But I do think there will be a solid plan in place moving forward, and that's one of the things I am confident about with the staff is that they'll do their homework and they'll do due diligence and not kind of slack off on this because if they miss on this group of quarterbacks, it could be a huge miss because there is a lot of talent in this class in terms of quarterbacks just in state.
Hmm. Yeah, and in states, there's some big recruits in this class. Carter Nelson's a big time player, and so I feel like even outside of the quarterback position,
David
that's
Hall,
probably
the wide receiver.
yeah, definitely. And those are some guys, to keep an eye on, for 2024 class, and to see kind of how things go. But at least with Carter Nelson, he was there for junior day and things got off to a solid start. And so I think, with the way that, Matt Rule and these guys are prioritizing Nebraska, they're setting themselves up really well there. And, look, Carter Nelson to me is a future pro at the tight end position, and he would be a huge get. So that's another kind of name to watch for the 2024 recruiting class, which definitely has the potential to be a really great class for Nebraska. Um, so before we kind of wrap things up, we haven't talked a lot about basketball, but just a reminder, there is a couple Big Ten play basically starts this week again for the women and the men. The women are taking on the Michigan Wolverines tonight in Nebraska, so that should be a big matchup. Amy Williams' crew's been playing pretty well lately. They got a 3 overtime win over Kansas in their last matchup last week. So, we'll see if they can kind of get things going in the Big Ten. And then the men's team playing tomorrow night, I believe at Iowa. So that's going to be, I know they're playing Iowa. I'm just blanking it, but I believe that's a road game. Either way, it's going to be, a really kind of tough schedule coming up here. And, Fran McCaffrey and everybody, we all know about the Iowa, their team that can shoot the heck out of the basketball, but it'd be really great for this team to kind of get back on the winning track on the basketball side of things.
Nebraska's at the vault for this one, so that's a good
Oh,
thing.
okay. That
And
helps.
yeah, that definitely helps. And
That makes me feel better about it.
Iowa also just lost to Eastern Illinois in their last time out, so who knows? I mean, you talk about a conference with parity. The Big Ten, basketball conference doesn't really have, at the end of the day, when push comes to shove in March, they will have a favorite. But right now, as we're slogging through kind of the midpoint of the season, it's a dogfight. And I think, this game will be a nice test for Nebraska. They got a good win against Queens. Yes, I know it's Queens, but especially for this basketball program, you take wins any way you can get them.
Mhm.
Shame on the Nebraska athletic department for charging fans extra for a game that wasn't even part of the season ticket package right before Christmas. I don't know what you guys are thinking there, but anyway, because who wants to watch Queens when you have to go pay for Christmas presents? But this one, I think, it'll be another good test. I mean, they got to get ready for Big Ten play. I mean, we've talked about it all year. I know we have, Chris. You can have these wins early on, but the real test is in Big Ten play. And even last season, things looked semi-promising, but then as soon as Big Ten play happened, things dropped off until the very end. But by then it was, kind of not too late. But you would have liked to have seen this effort in January and February, not just at the end of, you know, February and the beginning of March. So this will be the first good test, and coming off that loss, Iowa will be ready. And I think this will be a good game. I don't think it will be a blowout, but if Nebraska can continue with their aggressive defensive identity, then that'll keep them in games and in this game.
Yeah, and it's really, thinking, that it is at the vault. I mean, this is really, if Nebraska wants to have any type of, run at postseason play, this is a game they need to win because right now they're 7-6. Obviously, they've got 18 Big Ten games to go, and that they're 0-2 in the conference right now. You really can't drop to 0-3, and then the next game's at Michigan State, at the Breslin Center. So I mean, then you're staring 0-4 right in the face. And so, honestly, this really is a must-win for Fred Hoiberg and this basketball team if they want to have any type of run it. Because look, if you want to make the NIT, you still have to have a 500 record. And so to do that, Nebraska's going to have to, because you figure you're losing out a game. So, I mean, they're next to 18 games in the Big Ten plus like 2 in the tournament. So if you to go 10, you're going to have to win 10 of those 20 games. So Nebraska's going to have to go 10-10, and that would put them at 17-16, which I know doesn't sound spectacular, but that would be a hell of a record for this program against, this schedule too. Because I mean, this schedule is like a murderer's row. It really is tough. There's not any, I mean, outside of Minnesota, who looked, pretty poor, every team in the Big Ten is good, and Nebraska's probably the second lowest ranked team, in the Ken Palm or whatever outside of Minnesota. So there's no off nights, and hopefully they can scrape together some wins. I feel like at least, you know, I'm looking. I feel like Fred's got to win somewhere in the 7-8 range. I don't think he can win like 5 Big Ten games. So I mean, there's that. There's that too. Even beyond, trying to get to the tournament, Fred's got to win enough games. I feel like 8 would be a solid number, maybe 7. It just depends how it goes. But every Big Ten game for this program and for this head coach is absolutely critical, especially at home. They've only got 9 more home games, and frankly, if they're going to have any opportunity to, because if they went 9-9, they would finish 9-11, which would be a pretty solid record. But you're going to have to go like 8-1 or 7-2 at the, in these last 9 games at the vault to get there. So you can't afford to lose this game to Iowa. Frankly, you just can't do it.
And despite the improvement that this year's team has shown defensively, when you look at the bigger picture, there's not a lot where you can say, okay, Fred Hoiberg had a decent year, then we have to keep him. I
Yeah.
mean, granted, if things improve and they keep improving and playing like they have been, then sure. But if they have, you know, if they lose, a lot of these Big Ten games and the team kind of free falls in conference play like it did last year, then there's not a lot of reason I think for Hoiberg to stay around. And I don't care about you know the improvement at the beginning of the season. And yes, they almost beat Purdue, but at the end of the day, Fred Hoiberg doesn't have room for almost. A coach with a winning record over the past couple years who's rebuilding a program again has room for almost. Hoiberg doesn't have enough room for almost that can help him keep his job, in my opinion. So
Yeah, it will. Yeah, I mean, and that's he's got to win. He's got to put together some wins, and it's like kind of the same thing with Scott Frost. Who are they going to get? Well, there's lots of good coaches out there, and maybe look, Tim Miles wasn't a guy that you would ever said was going to be a dream home run. They got him from Colorado State, and he ended up being the most successful coach they've had since Danny Nee. I mean, frankly, so I mean, Danny Nee was the coach when I grew up watching the Eric Piatkowski days. If all my old school fans will know what I'm talking about in the 1995 Cornhuskers, or maybe 94. It might have been 94 when they won the Big 8 tournament championship and then got bounced in the first round of the tournament. But anyways, so there's only been, I think in my entire lifetime as a Nebraska basketball fan, there's only been 2 trips to the tournament. One was the Tim Miles and one was the Eric Piatkowski one. So I mean, expectations are what they are. This has never been like a consistently great program. So I think Trev's thinking about that too. And obviously the transition to the Big Ten's been tough, but that there's enough
in
resources
football and
here.
basketball.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it started well. I mean, Nebraska, it started well for the Huskers in basketball. They remember they beat Wisconsin. They had that big late season win, and a couple of great games, and for a while they were a really solid team. All the way through the Tim Miles era, the last couple of years, and then it's really, I think the hope was that Fred was going to be able to take that, 16-17 win program and get it to 20, and it's like fallen off. So where it's, now it's like trying to get back to that point where Tim Miles had it, and hopefully that happens soon, and hopefully it'll all be worth it. But if I have to believe if they only win like 5 Big Ten games, Fred's got to be gone. He just has to be.
And the thing about it is, people are saying, "Oh, we never should have fired Tim Miles," but that season, I remember as soon as was it Isaac Copeland who got hurt, that team started to free fall.
Yeah, there was a couple guys, but yeah, I
And
can't remember exactly who.
it's interesting the juxtaposition because Tim Miles didn't really recruit too well, but he at least won more than Fred has. Fred can recruit really well, and he has nothing to show for it. So we just
Yeah.
can't get one coach that can do both, and it is pretty disappointing and frustrating. uh,
Well, we'll see, and hopefully this winds up being a good week for Nebraska basketball. Like I said, the tonight is Michigan. They're ranked 14th, I think, in the women's AP poll. So and Nebraska's a really good team. If you haven't taken the time and watched Jazz Shelley play yet, you definitely need to do that. So watch the Huskers tonight. I also believe they're in the vault, and then tomorrow night against
Yep.
Iowa. Two big games, so we can talk a little hoop on Friday in our next episode. So make sure that you guys hit the subscribe button. Make sure you like the video, get into the comments section, tell us what you think about some of these moves, Garrett Nelson and Ben Scott and the 2024 recruiting class. And then we'll catch up with you on Friday, and we'll break down some of these basketball games and see what's next for Nebraska football.
Yeah, and I think we're only about 20 or something subs away from 400. Not that we count tremendously. We'll always be here spouting off our opinions either way, but we do appreciate the support, and hopefully there's some more news. So far, there's been no shortage of it. So
Yeah, it's been a busy time to be a Nebraska fan. So make sure you follow along here with the Husker Big Red YouTube channel to keep you updated, and also HuskerBigRed.com, thegreatcornholio.org, and we will see you guys back on Friday. And as always, go Big Red.
go Big Red.